Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we're taking a look at what I believe is one of the cheapest 3440 by 1440 144Hz ultra-wide monitors on the market, the AOC CU34G2X. This isn't the newest monitor going around. I think it's been available for the last few months in some countries, but given it looks to be one of the best value offerings floating around with these specifications, I think it's worth an in-depth review. Like a lot of more budget-oriented gaming monitors, this display doesn't use any groundbreaking technology. It sticks to the same 3440 by 1440 144Hz curved VA panels that we've seen in a range of monitors over the last year or so. It has adaptive sync support with low frame rate compensation, and on the AOC website there's no bold claims of HDR support or wide gamut colors, so this display is just being positioned as a capable 144Hz option for gamers. The key feature here though is the price. AOC is selling this monitor for just $440 US, making it one of the cheapest 3440 by 1440 144Hz monitors on the market. The first budget displays with these specs launched at over $500, so it's nice to have seen the price drop steadily over time and now sit just $100 or so above entry-level 100Hz offerings. It's also a great value option in places like Australia. Monitor pricing is a little crazy here right now, but still, given the options, it's not too bad. Looking at the build quality, we're getting a similar design to AOC's previous displays, just extended for an ultra-wide format. This means a fairly basic plastic construction with the combination of black, silver and red used throughout. There's a few red V-shaped highlights on the rear, so a bit of that classic gamer style coming through, but I don't think it's too bad here, and overall I think the design is reasonable for this sort of product. The stand uses a wide V-shaped base with a slim pillar. I was actually surprised at how slim the pillar was. It didn't look suitable for an ultra-wide monitor, but when it's installed, it's a sturdy stand with a decent range of motion. We get height adjustability plus tilt and swivel support, which is better than average for a lot of budget displays. Often in this price category, you're stuck with just tilt adjustment, so AOC is providing a bit extra here, which is always nice. The main downside to the design is a lack of a directional toggle for navigating through the OSD, so we're stuck with face buttons. AOC provides a number of features in their OSD, but it's cumbersome to navigate with the button offerings, so you probably won't want to mess around too often. Some of the features in here include low blue light modes, shadow boosting, and even a backlight strobing mode. But spoiler alert, the backlight strobing mode is bad and not worth using. Standard array of ports here with two HDMI 2.0 ports, two DisplayPort 1.4 ports, and a 4-port USB 3.2 hub, which is quite decent. As a reminder, you'll need to use DisplayPort if you want to access the full 144Hz refresh rate on offer here. HDMI 2.0 is limited to 100Hz. Let's jump right into some response time numbers, starting with the first of four overdrive modes, off. At 144Hz, we see 9.64 millisecond gray-to-gray average performance, which is reasonable for a VA's native performance, but not fast enough for a 144Hz refresh rate. Similar story using the weak mode. We see about a 1 millisecond improvement to response times, but this isn't enough to deliver a good 144Hz experience. Using the medium mode, we see another 1 millisecond improvement, now with an average gray-to-gray transition of 7.48 milliseconds. However, just 62% of transitions complete within a reasonable tolerance of the 6.94 millisecond refresh rate window. What this means in practice is that 40% of transitions take longer than a single refresh to complete, which can lead to one frame smearing into the next at 144Hz. Because of this, I don't classify this performance as true 144Hz. The experience you are getting here is closer to 120Hz in visual appearance. Then there's also the matter of dark level smearing, which like a lot of VA panels is present on the CU34G2X in this mode. I describe this as moderate dark level smearing, given some transitions are in the 15 to 20 millisecond range, but not up in the 30 plus range like the worst offenders offer. This is a known weakness of VA panels and something that is hard to avoid. The reason why I focused on the medium mode here is that the strong mode is unusable due to high levels of overshoot. This response time pattern is quite unusual, with some transitions in the 7 millisecond range and others in the 1 millisecond range, but I've verified this multiple times and the results are highly dependent on whether the exact transition has overshoot or not, but in any case, not a mode I'd recommend. So if we return back to the medium mode, like I said, we're not really getting a true 144Hz experience, and it would have been nice if there was a mode between medium and strong that pushed up performance just that bit to give us at least 70 to 80% refresh rate compliance. But when turning the refresh rate down to 120Hz, you can see that we do now have that level of compliance, so the CU34G2X is at least a 120Hz capable panel, offering something above that of 100Hz monitors. The other reasonable thing to see here is that the medium mode delivers the best overdrive performance throughout the refresh range, so there's no need to change overdrive settings depending on the refresh rate. This is partly because the medium mode doesn't exactly push performance to its limits, but still, the results are reasonable. The only major concern I have here is with 60Hz performance, where a bulk of transitions are quite slow and end up around the 16 millisecond mark. Again, this performance seemed a bit unusual to me, but I triple checked it, and yeah, it seems that for some of these refresh rates, the overdrive has just been tweaked such that transitions sneak just in under the refresh rate window. When putting the CU34G2X up against a range of other monitors we've tested, performance is in the mid-range to entry-level zone. We're not seeing much different here to other VA monitors of the past few years, so a best case response time average in the 7 to 8 millisecond range. Given the panels here haven't evolved too much, this is not a surprise. Looking at some of the main competitors, the Nixius NX EDG34S is slightly faster and also performs better at lower refresh rates. Meanwhile, 100Hz offerings such as the Kogan model here are a bit slower, fitting with their lower refresh rates. It is possible to get a faster VA at 144Hz, such as the MSI MPG341CQR. However, this display costs a lot more and also has higher error rates. For the best 1440p ultrawide performance, we're still looking at LG IPS models like the 34G and 850 we recently reviewed. Dark level performance is average for a VA, so again, nothing overly surprising here. Dark transitions are, on average, twice as slow as from a typical IPS panel, and for some of the worst offenders, you're looking at 3 to 4 times worse. This is the main performance weakness for VA panels, and a reason you might want to consider an IPS panel instead, although they are much more expensive in this performance category. Refresh rate compliance is weak, as we talked about, falling well behind other options. That said, a competitor like the NX EDG34S doesn't fare that much better. In a positive note, average error rates are very low, so you are unlikely to see any inverse ghosting with this mode. That said, we have to follow that straight up with a negative, which is 60Hz performance, where the CU34G2X falls behind the pack. This is a monitor better suited to gaming in the 80 to 120Hz range. Input latency is decent, assisted by a low processing delay. However, that's not unusual for a modern gaming monitor, with most delivering sub 1 millisecond processing lag. The main issue here is more in terms of response times, which limit total input lag to over 10 milliseconds. Then for power consumption, pretty standard stuff here, so this isn't the most efficient display of these specs going around. For color performance, the AOC CU34G2X sits in an interesting place because it is actually a wide gamut monitor, despite AOC's website not detailing any wide gamut functionality. With that said, it's not a hugely wide gamut display, only offering about 85% coverage of the P3 color space, so this isn't suitable for P3 accurate work. It is, however, enough to deliver a more vibrant image than a regular sRGB display, if you're into that sort of thing. Unfortunately, factory calibration is less than stellar here, mostly relating to a totally incorrect gamma, as you can see in the center of this chart. The grey line should be following the yellow line as closely as possible for correct sRGB gamma, but it instead falls too low, which leads to high delta E performance. White balance is solid though out of the box, with very little tweaks needed there. Saturation performance is respectable, with only a small amount of oversaturation due to the unclamped color gamut. In some ways, having just 85% P3 coverage has its advantages. For people that do like that oversaturated or vibrant look, I actually think this is reasonable performance given the vibrant effect isn't too strong. That said, it's not accurate, which is why we aren't getting delta E performance below 2.0 in our tests. For some reason as well, AOC's gamma controls don't change the gamma all that much with this monitor, so there isn't much we can do to correct performance using the OSD controls. Let's instead move on to a full calibration and see what's possible. Results here are strong as expected, with the gamma issues corrected such that we get good performance, and this carries through to color tests where we see sub 2.0 delta E averages. P3 performance isn't as good, with significant clipping at the top end of the saturation charts, as the display simply can't show colors on the outer edges of the gamut, so it's for this reason that I wouldn't recommend the CU34G2X for any color accurate wide gamut work. The other less than stellar aspect to color performance is brightness. This panel is only capable of 241 nits peak after calibration, which is below average and won't be suitable for those that use their monitor in a bright or glary environment. The minimum standard for monitors these days should be 300 or even 350 nits in my opinion, yet the past few AOC monitors I've reviewed have failed to reach this level. I think AOC needs to reevaluate their choice of backlight. Contrast though is fine with around a 2600:1 ratio, so you are getting noticeably deeper blacks than with an IPS display of otherwise similar specifications. Viewing angles are decent, although somewhat limited by the 1500R curve, and of course there's no IPS glow. Uniformity is really solid for white with my unit, only seeing a slight fall off in the upper right corner, but this wasn't visible during most usage. Grey uniformity is less impressive. The left and right edges weren't quite as good as the center here, so this can lead to some uneven colors at times. That said, my panel had minimal backlight bleed. Overall, the AOC CU34G2X performs pretty much as expected in a number of areas. This is a budget class display using existing ultrawide VA panels, so performance was always going to be in the range that we've seen previously from these sorts of monitors. That is to say, performance is okay without being amazing. We're not setting new records for a cheaper monitor, but most people will still be happy with the performance on offer. Like with most budget monitors, the key discussion here is around trade-offs. What has been sacrificed to deliver such a low price point? Well, there don't seem to be any major flaws here or key feature omissions. More, the CU34G2X lacks a bit of polish around the edges. Take brightness as one example. For most buyers, 240 nits will be fine, but it's below average and won't be suitable for everyone. Calibration and P3 coverage as well. It's not terrible or anything, but on a higher end product you would see a bit more polish here. And this carries through to response time performance and the overdrive settings, which for a lot of gamers is going to be totally fine, but lacks the fine tuning you see with more expensive products. I've seen some OEMs get a little bit more out of this panel than AOC has, with closer to a true 144Hz experience, but they offer their monitor at a higher price. And while performance for the CU34G2X ends up more around the 120Hz mark than true 144Hz, this is still a meaningful upgrade over 100Hz and is worth spending the extra cash on. I also think when looking at budget monitors that it's easy to get caught up in some of the downsides to these displays. You'll often see comments like, yuck, this monitor has dark level smearing, VA panels are so bad, but realistically you won't get anything better at this price point. Sure, IPS ultrawides are the gold standard right now, but are you willing to spend twice as much? For a lot of people, the answer is no. So when you look at what this monitor is offering for just $440, I think the end result is pretty decent. So when it comes down to it, and I look at the AOC CU34G2X versus something like the Nixius NX EDG34S, I think the CU34G2X comes out on top as the better value option. It's a little over $100 cheaper, offers similar performance, not quite as good, but not hugely behind, plus a few advantages of its own like a height adjustable stand. So really, I've got no issues recommending this display for those after a 3440 by 1440 high refresh experience on a limited budget. That's it for this review. Hope you guys all learnt something, and if you're interested in supporting the channel and our monitor testing, we do have our Patreon page. Links to that are in the description below. You'll get access to our calibrated ICC profiles, monthly live streams, Discord chat, all that sort of thing. You can also subscribe to get more monitor reviews in your inbox. We're doing these pretty frequently these days, lots of monitors in the backlog. That's it. I'll catch you in the next one.